Welcome to F1 Goes Now. I'm Kshitij. With me, I have Raul and Rax. So this Sunday we had the Hungarian GP and a pretty decent race, I would say, with a lot of drama in qualifying. And the race was, I would say, not as exciting, but we sure had a lot of things happening in the race. So let's kick this episode off with the qualifying. So Raul and Rax, what are your thoughts about the qualifying?
I think, the race can be described as, chaotic without much happening. Qualifying was pretty much the same. I mean, the first 4 positions was a Mercedes 1, 2, 3, 4. And we had some surprises, but in general, pretty standard race, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a decent race.
no.
Yeah, so about the surprises and
If
Drax.
you look at qualifying, it was very stale. I mean, the best performing cars were up there, the least performing cars were down there. So this was pretty expected, apart from racing cars.
Actually, let's quickly run through the order and go through, what happened. So, Q1 saw both the Haas's, both the Alfa Romeos, and Danny Kvyat out.
Yeah,
We've come to expect that. Q2 actually, Q2 saw Russell and Latifi out
Latifi.
in Q2, so that was kind of
That was, I think,
I mean,
that was unexpected.
brilliant. Yeah, that was brilliant driving by both the Williams drivers, and the Williams car seems to be performing well in qualifying. We can definitely see some pace as compared to the previous years.
I remember seeing in their last lap or something like that, when Russell went for his final lap in Q1, he was third or something like that.
Yes,
on the
he
leaderboard,
moved.
and I was just
Correct.
shocked. But again, they not fast enough to get
so
to Q3. So you
can we
saw,
expect in
Gasly
2021
out.
a Mercedes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. If Williams manages to keep their team afloat with the money, yeah. Because this time you have Alfa Romeo's really struggling with pace as compared to the Williams, so the Ferraris do struggle a lot.
I mean, they aren't
Haas
even a
also.
Ferrari right now. They are just a Fiat. Not even a bar.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, other than
So
yeah.
Q2 saw Ricardo out, Russell out. Albon surprisingly could only do P13. I mean, he was behind George Russell. He had some real issues, and George Russell actually went on to defend him, saying Red Bull was making him look like an idiot. Which I mean,
Yeah, I
take
mean,
that how you will.
the car was just horrible to drive according to both of those drivers. I mean, there was no grip at all. I don't know if it was just an engine issue, but the car seemed to have no amount of grip in qualifying. We saw that
They
with
just couldn't seem
Verstappen
to get
too.
they couldn't seem to get a good setup on the car.
True.
The last two cars out
Let's
were Ocon and Latifi. And then we went to Q3. Q3 saw Pierre Gasly, who made it to Q3, but he had drivetrain issues and then engine issues, and it was just a whole mess. He didn't set a time, but he started
Yeah.
P10.
Yeah, which is a good thing.
Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris were 8th and 9th, or 9th and 8th in that order. So, I mean, not an amazing performance from them. I mean, we are used to seeing them a little higher these days, but I guess
Yeah, it's just
realistically,
there was just something wrong
very
with
good
the
future.
with both
Verstappen
the
was only
McLarens
P7,
this time.
which again shows how difficult it is to
Hold on.
drive that Red Bull.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
And the Ferraris was surprisingly on pace because they finished 5th and 6th, or qualified 5th and 6th actually, with Vettel 5th and Leclerc 6th. And then
Correct.
obviously ahead of that you had Hamilton, Bottas, Stroll and Perez, Mercedes 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. So the first grid was Mercedes. The second grid was the pink Mercedes, the Racing Point team. And the third row was both the Ferraris, followed by Max Verstappen in seventh. Eighth and ninth, you had Lando Carlos, followed by Gasly in 10th. So that was qualifying, and I think qualifying.
Interestingly though, here you had Hamilton and Bottas separated by a tenth of a second, and then an entire second all the way down to Lance Stroll, which is just incredible to see the performance delta on those
Yeah.
Mercedes. From like from the racing point of the Mercedes is like an entire second that they have up, which is incredible.
Yeah, so I think the Mercedes team, the car, and both those drivers are pushing that car to its limits, and it's just beautiful to watch a car and the driver perform so well. I mean, hats off to the Mercedes team.
And then at
Uh,
this point,
so,
Hamilton
yeah.
is racing his own ghost in the races. He doesn't even have any challenges.
That is true. I mean,
That's a really cool
he's
way of
just
putting
so
it.
fast in that Mercedes. I mean, like if you watch him drive, it's like poetry. The car, Hamilton. I mean, it's just beautiful to watch. He makes no mistakes on the track, and the car is just wow. Words cannot describe it. Moving on to the race. Uh, so when the cars were going on to the grid just before the race, you had Max Verstappen crash into the barriers, which damaged the front end of his cars, and that that could have made him not start the race. I mean, if that crash was worse, I mean, I don't think Max Verstappen would have made it to the race.
You know, the prophecy was
But
fulfilled yesterday. Red Bull did indeed give him wings.
Oh, I think that was. I really appreciate what those mechanics did. I mean, they finished about an hour-long job in I think 20 minutes, which is brilliant. I mean,
And
they
that
had
too
to
on a
replace
grid,
the
not
nose
even in pit stop.
on the grid. Exactly, they had to replace the nose, they had to replace the wing, and they had. I think something broke on the left side of the tire. Was
The
it? I
suspension
think.
assembly.
The suspension.
Yeah, the suspension was damaged. So the front wing, the nose, and the suspension. I think hats off to those Red Bull mechanics, and I think that was just beautiful. I mean, unbelievable job by those mechanics over there. Brilliant, I would say.
And then
So Max
Verstappen
Verstappen,
finishing P2 was worth it.
P2. I
Yeah,
think
and
when you
for
go from
P7 after all of that stuff, it's just incredible to see the driver that he is.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Max Verstappen and the Red Bull team, beautiful. That's just amazing what the mechanics did over there. So when it was lights out, you had Hamilton just take off. You had Bottas who jumped to the start, but he didn't get any penalty because he was still in his box. So no
And
penalty over there.
I think more importantly, he stopped and then started again. So he was stationary when the lights went out, and we saw the same
Correct.
thing happen to Vettel. I think it was in Japan 19, where
Yeah.
a similar thing happened again. He escaped with a penalty, and I think giving a penalty at that point would be harsh uh, because of the jump start, it didn't lead and it didn't give him an advantage. In fact, it gave him a disadvantage because he
Yeah,
dropped down to fifth or sixth on track.
correct.
So
So you had Charles Leclerc get a very good start. Was battling with Max Verstappen, and I think in the start, coming out of the first corner, Ferraris were fourth and fifth, if I'm not wrong, which I think was pretty good considering where they had qualified. I mean, they were just one place below, but they made a place. Uh, and before that, you had both the Haas go into the pits before the race started. I think after the formation lap, they
Yeah.
went into the pits and they went onto the slicks. I mean, a brilliant strategy play there by the Haas's. Because I think further into the race, both the Haas's were in the points and were I think Grosjean was even in the podium position for quite some time.
just a couple of laps, I think, before they were this
It
thing.
was
But
Magnussen
yeah,
for 3 or 4 laps.
Magn-
yeah, for 3 or 4 laps they were driving in third and fourth. But
Yeah.
as soon as it wasn't sustainable. So I think they finished fifth, Grosjean finished 15th. Magnussen finished ninth, but then they got a 10-second penalty because they were told to box in the formation lap, which you're not allowed to do as per the sporting regulations. So they finished P10 and P16, but still 1 point for Haas, which is
Yeah, I think that is brilliant after what the team has gone through. Both the cars didn't finish in the first race, and I think they didn't get points in the second race either. So I think overall a decent race for the Haas. At least a point. They salvaged 1 point from this race. As we go ahead a little, you had Max Verstappen really driving well. He was behind Lewis Hamilton in P2. Valtteri Bottas managed to make it to P3, and I think the racing points weren't as good in the race as they were in qualifying.
I'll reframe that. Let's say racing points were good, but the drivers weren't competitive enough. So if you put a
I
competitive
think, yeah,
driver, then the car is very worth driving.
true, true, true. They were driving really well. You had Sebastian Vettel. I think Sebastian Vettel had a decent race as compared to the previous races. His car was performing a little good. I mean, as compared to the rest of as the rest of the season. I mean, the previous two
I
races.
mean, this race he saved
Talking
his
of,
race himself. I mean, Ferrari had a very bad
hmm,
strategy. They called him to pit in for softs when Verstappen was 8 seconds ahead of him. And the reason they wanted him to pit was they said they want to undercut Verstappen, which was totally idiotic. So he just said, "I won't pit," and then he
it's for the
and then he formed his own strategy, went in for medium, and then saved his race himself. So heads off to Ferrari.
correct because yeah, hats off to Vettel with the Ferrari team. I mean, they gave so Leclerc went into the pits. I think in the third lap or the second lap. I'm not. Which lap was it? I think it was the third lap. So Leclerc went into the pits, went on to softs. He was, I think, the only driver on the grid
His
on
softs.
softs when everyone decided to go on the
no.
slicks.
I think the
So
Williams went on to soft as well.
I see. Okay. Leclerc pitted, got came onto softs, but then he struggled on the tires. He could even hear him complain on the radio saying that his tires were rubbish, and we saw it in the race. He was being overtaken by everyone on the grid. Actually, you had Carlos Sainz pass him, even Lando Norris at one point. So he was getting passed in a Ferrari by every other driver. You had Vettel pit, and Vettel got held up in the pits because there was a lot of traffic in the garage, in the pit lane. You had a lot of cars come in. Talking about the pit lane, you had Nicholas Latifi with an unsafe release. He ended up with a punctured tire and even got a penalty. Was it I think it was a 5 second penalty.
Uh,
Now, with that penalty and with that puncture, he finished 5 laps after Lewis Hamilton. I mean, he was 5 laps down, so he got lapped by Lewis Hamilton 5 times.
uh, he already was 5 laps behind him, and then he got a 5 second penalty. Was it even worth it for an unsafe release?
Exactly. It wasn't. I think that was a very hasty move by the Williams team. It endangered Carlos Sainz's race because he went into Carlos Sainz front wing. But luckily, nothing much happened to Carlos Sainz. Uh, the Sam series was pretty decent. Not much happening. The midfield battle, though, this time you had some brilliant driving by Carlos Sainz. His battle with Charles Leclerc was one to watch. The future teammates really battled it very well, very clean racing. You even had Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, but Charles Leclerc eventually managed to pass Lando Norris. Lando Norris finished P13, a very, I would say, substandard performance from him, even for Carlos Sainz, because Carlos Sainz finished P9, Lando was P13, so could have been better, but hopefully next race they will bounce back.
Yeah, definitely. Hope to see that.
Yeah. So
Yeah, besides
moving
that,
on
I
to the
think we saw some really interesting battles, especially to turn one and turn two, because those were the DRS zones. Everywhere else, it just seemed impossible to overtake. But
uh,
not really, like, they really seem to be kind of all the brilliant overtakes seem to be undone by the pit stops later, or they were
Mm,
fighting for like positions far back. So a really great race to watch, but not so much for the result actually.
correct. One good battle was between Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas. I mean, you had first of all, great driving by Valtteri Bottas. He managed to close, I think, was it a 10-second gap, and even came very close to overtaking Max Verstappen, but Max Verstappen held on pretty well.
Uh,
Brilliant
let me
driving by
add.
Max Verstappen.
He covered 20-second
Mm.
gaps twice.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's
First
pretty
in
brilliant
mediums, then in
by
hards.
pretty
So that,
brilliant drive.
yeah,
But I mean, he just is lacking that little bit extra, which I think Hamilton would have got it done and
He's a
got the
great
job done and
driver, no
finished
doubt.
second.
But he's not a
But
championship material driver. I mean,
yeah, he
exactly.
really
he
needs
can
to be
drive
that
fast,
second
but he
this
doesn't go
time.
for overtakes. He doesn't go for risky overtakes. What I mean.
Right.
Correct. That's the difference between Hamilton and Bottas. I mean, that is what we need to understand. Hamilton, I think I was watching one of Hamilton's interviews, and he said he changes his driving style every race so that he can adapt to the tires. And we saw that in this race, he managed to build a 25-second lead over Max Verstappen, a 25-second lead, and he was able to. He even lapped Sebastian Vettel's
Yes.
Ferrari, I guess. Yes. Now, for Sebastian Vettel was in P6. He lapped a car in P6 and it was a Ferrari. That just shows how brilliant
I mean, but
Lewis Hamilton
Ferrari,
is.
I think in 2020 Ferrari barely means anything. But actually, while watching the race, I was looking at the timing sheets, and before that last pit stop that Hamilton did to get that fastest lap, and I think it's pretty obvious he could have finished the race on those mediums and had no issues whatsoever. But we saw the racing points, which are the closest, the second fastest car on the field, and Hamilton was still uh, what was it, 75 seconds ahead of them, or something ridiculous like that,
Yes, yes, he was 75 seconds ahead, yeah.
which is just incredible to see how the difference that they're pulling.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable to watch. I mean, what's going on in the Mercedes factory? Because it's unbelievable. The car is unbelievable, and even Lewis Hamilton, brilliant driving by the and this is the third time in a row that he's won in Hungary. No one else has done that. So I think it's not just Mercedes, but Lewis Hamilton too deserves the credit. Brilliant drive by the lad, and that just goes to show how good Lewis Hamilton is. Whether it's in the rain, dry, give him. He would be able to drive in the Goa weather. The way he drives,
That too on slicks.
give him wet tires and let him drive around Goa in the monsoons. I mean, that dude would still like set staggering lap times over here.
But I think
So that's
our
just
Kadambas might overtake him.
Dude, I think you should go about it the other way around. Put the Kadamba drivers in his car, and they'll be winning every round. The results for the race, I mean, some interesting stuff. I mean, Hamilton winning the race for the third time in a row, which is, I think, he's the only driver now to win Hungary 3 times in a row, and he's also one of
and
the most successful drivers at Hungary, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, eight
Um,
wins in Hungary.
yeah, you had Verstappen
Uh,
finishing second, 8 seconds behind him. Bottas almost had Verstappen on that last lap, but he just can't do those risky overtakes, and that he finished third in the end. Stroll
mm,
finished fourth, which is pretty good, I guess, for the Racing
Racing
Point.
point.
Albon finished fifth. A pretty good recovery drive, starting all the way down in 13th to finish in fifth.
Correct.
I still think, he should have been higher, seeing where Verstappen was. Um, I mean, he finished 70 seconds behind Verstappen, which is just like, you can't be doing that in a Red Bull in the same car as your teammate. Um,
Exactly.
Vettel finished sixth, good points for Ferrari. Perez finished seventh, which is kind of disappointing. Started in fourth, all the way down at seventh. He had a pretty. I think he got screwed over in the pit stops.
Definitely. I think
Um,
that's where a Racing Point to mess up their strategies and the drivers. I think they
yeah,
need to work on that.
then you had eighth was Ricardo, ninth was Sainz, and rounding up the top 10 was Kevin Magnussen's Haas after his penalty. Um,
Hmm.
Leclerc only managed a P11, which, I mean, bad strategy and just a perfect storm for them. Kvyat was 12th, Norris 13th. We used to seeing him a little higher, but I guess, he also had a bunch of issues. Ocon finished 14th, Raikkonen 15th, Grosjean, because of his penalty, ended up 16th. Uh, Antonio Giovinazzi 17th, Russell 18th, Latifi 19th, and Pierre Gasly, who DNF'd due to, again, drivetrain engine issues, uh, finishing up. As in, yeah.
So I think that was a decent race, not as exciting as we thought it would be, because
But
you
I
had
guess
Lewis
I guess
Hamilton go about his.
Hungary is like Monaco, but the roads are a little wider. So you don't get there are not too
Yeah,
many overtaking opportunities. You end up with only the main straight turn one and then into turn two. And if you can't pass there, then you just have to sit behind the car and wait through the rest of the
true.
track until you can get
True.
halfway.
Yeah.
So um, you know, it's also a slower track, so I think it's not as engine dependent. That's why I think we saw Ferrari perform better. We're generally used to seeing Red Bull perform really good here, but I don't know what happened to their aero this time. It just couldn't seem to lock it down. Uh, but yeah, I think the last 3 weekends we've had a triple header. We've had Austria, we've had Styria, and we've had Hungary, which, I mean, uh, all pretty good races. One week after week, every weekend, and now we finally the teams get a break. We don't want the break, but you know, and then we have the double header
Silverstone.
in Silverstone, the Great Britain, and then Spain. So we have
Correct.
actually a triple header, which I can only
True.
look forward to.
So I think the race in Great Britain is on the 2nd of August, which is 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
two
two
weeks, 2
weeks.
weeks.
Yeah, so
So we'll
we'll
see
be
you
back
then.
though.
Yeah, we'll see you
Yeah,
then.
we'll see you then. Yep. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Do like and subscribe and follow us on social media. F1 Goes Now is on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you, guys. Stay safe. I'm out. Cut,
That's a
right?
cut, right?
Yeah.